the iconic introduction and unforgettable catchphrase, he left a lasting mark on the wrestling industry, from winning Money in the Bank to his memorable feuds with legends. Straight Outta Jersey welcomes
Mr. Kennedy!
Welcome everyone to Straight Outta Jersey. I am Joe Zapata, and my next guest is a former WWE superstar who rose to the top with his trademark introduction. Now he owns his own wrestling school that's really well. He trains a lot of kids. He is the one and only from Green Bay, Wisconsin, weighing 246 pounds, the one and only
Mr. Anderson.
Anderson. Well, I saw you at the big event in New York, and I got to ask you, how many times, because I was by your wife towards the back, and I heard you do that chant, that gimmick introduction about 3 times, and your wife looked at me and was like, "Oh God, not again," with this look. How many times do you get asked to do that gimmick?
You know, it's not crazy. When I first started in WWE and I was on TV regularly, it was all the time.
All the time,
which never bothered me because I was just happy to be doing it. I was happy that they knew me for anything, so like it's never bothered me. The only thing that I sometimes it's annoying for the other people. One time I was doing this, it was like a red carpet event for the CW network when WWE or SmackDown first went over to CW, and there were all of these little stations, where Entertainment Tonight was there, and I remember what's his name? Big black guy that he's like the host of America's Got Talent. I
will forget the guy's name. I know who you're talking about. I think he was
like next to me, like he was either one person behind me or in front of me, because you'd go to the station, you'd get interviewed, and then you'd go, and I just kept doing it. I kept hitting it. I remember him just looking over like, I gotta hear this all day, man. Like,
I think that's how your wife felt when I heard it again. Just looked up and looked at me.
Tired of it. It's possible.
Yeah. I want to talk about your wrestling school first. You obviously your wrestling school. Do you do a lot of promos and stuff like the NEX or NXT, like stuff like that?
No, we don't. We are not affiliated with WWE or AEW or really any independent promotions. We have working relationships with several of those.
Okay.
Once you're in the business, and I've established myself. I've been wrestling now for 25 years, and I've done a fair number of things. I know everybody. Everybody knows everybody in the wrestling business. So it's like, the interesting thing is, like, I don't necessarily have to reach out to any of those places and hey, I've got so-and-so, can you use them? It's like my students usually just network on their own.
Oh, wow.
There's we've got such a good system, and they understand the business that they just help each other. And I really occasionally somebody will say, "Hey, I see that you're on a show and such. Any chance that I could ride with you, or any chance you could get me booked on that show?" And like, I'll reach out at that point. When AEW or WWE come to town, like, I'll reach out and see if they need any extras and try to help guys out that way. But yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily affiliated. However, I do have several of my students that have, like, Julia Hart in AEW was one of my students. Dante and Darius Martin were my students. And again, those people, like, they got there on their own. I had no hand in getting them there, getting them connected with AEW. They did all that legwork on their own. Cal Bloom, Tiffany Stratton.
There was a tag team also too, right? A tag.
What was that?
You had a tag team also, I think.
Right? Well, there's Dante and Darius Martin right now in AEW, and then I just had 2 of my students two more students who worked against Dante and Darius, but they were just extras. It was just kind of a enhancement match for Dante and Darius.
April 6th, you actually have two New Jersey guys, the Headbangers,
Yeah.
Chad and Glenn coming. I know them. They're coming up to your school. Correct?
Okay. Yeah, they're coming to do a little seminar. We try to give our students as much access to as many different philosophies as possible. You know, like I got to where I got to in the business, not because of one particular person. It was a handful of different people. It was a little bit from this guy and a little bit from that guy. And I think, you know, I have my own philosophy, my own recipe for success. And I feel like everybody else has a different, you know, a different story and different formula. And I like to make sure you don't just take it from me, you take it from somebody else. And the funny thing is like oftentimes I will hammer something in class and I'll hammer it and I'll hammer it and I'll be like, they're not getting it, they're not listening to me. And then we'll have a seminar, somebody will come in and I'll be like, you know, afterwards, after action review, kind of like, hey, anything you guys took away from that? And they'll say the thing that I've been saying for months and months and months. And it's like, I don't get mad at it. It's just interesting that's sometimes it takes somebody else saying the exact same thing in a different way for it to connect with you.
How is your overall health these days after taking all those bumps?
I feel great. Yeah.
You look good. You look good.
No, I feel you know, it's hard to get moving sometimes. Like I feel old in that sense. My joints are, but I'm healthy, knock on wood.
Yep.
Healthy overall. I don't have any like nagging injuries or anything like that. Just I guess overall my knees, my ankles, they suck, but I would never trade it for I wouldn't trade it. I'll take it. It's worth it.
Yep. Did you grow up a wrestling fan at all?
No, not at all.
Really?
Not at all. In fact, I was in the let's all fake category. Like I thought it was stupid. Which when people, you know, it's funny because now I get it. Excuse me. When I hear people say like, "Oh, it's fake," I get what they're saying because it's presented as a sport. And I think it's all in the presentation, and of course, it's all in kayfabe for years and years and years, right? It was like protected, and but at the same time, it's like, you know, like if you go see a movie, if you go see the latest Jurassic Park installment, you don't, you know, like, hey, what do you think of it? They don't say, well, it didn't really happen. You know, you just enjoy it. You suspend your disbelief for a little while.
Yep.
So I think the best, for me personally, like the best wrestling too is that wrestling that gets you to suspend your disbelief for a little bit. It's still like an element of reality and realism, but so you know that it's not, but it's like it looks real.
Yep.
And you know, emotionally you're attached to it.
So when did you do the change and say, you know what, I want to do this for a living? When did that happen?
I was at a friend's house. I want to say 1998 or so. And he was like a huge wrestling fan. He would always wear the t-shirt, talk about it, and I was always giving him a hard time. And one night it was just the two of us hanging out at his house, and he was like, "We're watching wrestling tonight." And I was like, come on, man. Like, and he just said no. He was insistent that there was this guy that I would really connect with. So we're sitting there, and I heard the glass break, and he was like, "This is the guy. This is the guy." And he drove out to the ring in a pickup truck. I remember distinctly. And he had a 6-pack of beer, and he was flipping the camera guy off, and just got out of the ring, and you know, did the hauled ass up into the ring, and just the way that he talked and the way that he moved, and I believed it, and I was like, that guy's actually pretty cool. And I started watching every week just to see what he would do. And then I was like, okay, well, the Undertaker's pretty cool too. And then Kane and all these other colorful characters and then I started getting it. I was like, oh, I get it. This is, of course, it's not a legitimate competition. It's entertainment.
Yeah, it's
And
entertainment.
I was very entertained by it. And it was very like, the tightrope walk between family friendly and because it was on TV and it was on in the United States. You can't swear on TV, but you can, they would go right up to that line, the backwards middle fingers and that kind of stuff. I appreciated that, the adult aspect of things.
And then you started training in to go OVW, correct?
No, I started training. I was at a party one night and somebody was like, hey, you can go to like wrestling school. But like, it never dawned on me how one would do this line of work. And somebody was like, yeah, there's like wrestling schools you can go to. You can go. He was like, this lady that I work with, her son does that. And I couldn't get that out of my head. And I remember I went home and I got on the internet. It was like askjeeves.com. There was no Google at the time. And I looked up and I remember thinking, I lived in Two Rivers, Wisconsin, which is 30 miles south of Green Bay. And I remember thinking like, this is going to be one of those things where I'll need to go to a major city. And I mean, major like Chicago, LA, or New York. So I looked up, Chicago was the closest one to me. So I looked up wrestling schools in Chicago and I reached out to North American Wrestling Federation. And I called and I left a message. And I said, hey, it's Ken Anderson. I'd like to get in. I'm interested in getting involved in the business. Like a day or two later, I got a phone call from a guy in Green Bay who said, hey, I got your number from the North American Wrestling Federation. I'm opening a wrestling school in Green Bay. We're doing, it was $250 to come and try out, see if you like it, and then we'll go from there. So I went up. I remember it was like in an old J.C. Penney building. And, it was really dark. There was one light above the ring. It was a 16-foot lowrider ring. The canvas was all torn up. There was blood stains and other stains all over the mat and duct tape, and the ropes were kind of saggy. And I got in there and I took some bumps. They showed me how to take, 3 different types of bumps, run the ropes, a couple other things. And I just I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And I remember thinking like this, I want to do this. And so we went out to dinner. They said, are you interested? And I was like, absolutely. If you guys will have me, I want to start training. And so I just started training, and I trained for 9 months, had my first match. And then I spent the next 6 years working independence and just trying to get as good as I possibly could. And I learned as much as I could. And I sent tapes to WWE and I sent tapes to ECW and WCW and worked as many indies, did as many seminars as I could. And after 6 years, I got hired by WWE. And then I went to OVW. So by the time I got there, I had already been in the business for like 5.5, 6 years.
Okay. Jim Cornette, now he's the one that kind of held you back a little bit.
No, he didn't hold me back. So the thing about WWE, or the thing about developmental at the time, there's like 60 to 70 guys and girls there that are all trying to make it to the active roster.
Of course.
And, OVW TV at the time was 1 hour every Wednesday. So you would, the show itself was probably an hour and 45 minutes, maybe 2 hours long. You'd have a couple dark matches, and then you'd have the regular show. So, I was trying to figure out how to stand out. And I just wasn't doing a great job of doing that. Actually, right before Jim got fired, I cut a promo. He gave me an opportunity to cut a promo, and I did. And I feel like I knocked it out of the park. And I came back through the curtain. He was like, where has that guy been? And then I knew that I was sort of onto something. And then I think, one more time, he gave me another opportunity to cut another promo. And then he got fired.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like he held me back personally. It was just he's looking at all these different people.
Gotcha.
I just didn't stand out to him. That's all.
But Paul Heyman's the one who gave you the big push, correct?
Paul pulled me aside on day one, and he said, I've been paying attention to you. I had met him a few years earlier. He was ringside while I was working out in the ring as an extra one day, and he pulled me over and said, "Who trained you?" And I said, "Two guys in Green Bay, Mike Mercury and Eric Hammers." And then I also got some training through Brad Rangans, and Brad, of course, trained Brock, and they were very good friends, and so that sort of put me on the map for him. Plus, he apparently liked what I was doing in the ring that day. And so then he would come down to OVW when I was at OVW for the 4 or 5 months that Jim Cornette was writing TV. Paul would still come down once a month and work. He'd run promo class, and I would. The interesting thing is like promo class would be you knew he was coming, and he expected you to have a promo prepared, pick an opponent, I don't know if it was a 60 seconds or 90 seconds, have that prepared, and you would go into a room and you would sit and be Paul on the one side of the camera and just you and the camera, and that's it. And you cut your promo, and then he would critique it, offer some suggestions. Then you would go back home that night, work on those suggestions, come back and cut the promo again. So I would do that. And usually on day 2, so he would have corrections for me and critiques on day 1. Day 2, he would go, "Great, loved it, thank you." And I'd be like, "Anything else?" "Nope, loved it, thank you." Okay. And I'd be like, "This guy hates me. He thinks I'm the shits." He can't, he doesn't have anything to I'm that bad that he doesn't have anything to say to me. And then, on day 1, he said, "I've been paying attention to you. I've loved your promos. I feel like you have huge potential. I'm going to do so much stuff with you on TV here. They're going to have to pay attention. You're going to get an opportunity, and it's going to happen soon." And 5 weeks later, I got a phone call from Dreamer. That night, actually, like I said, OVW was a 1-hour program. I had about 35 minutes on that show that night between promos, a match. I was all over.
Yep.
And then every week it was kind of like that. He was just pushing me hard. And then Dreamer called me and said, "Hey, they want you to come to Columbus, Ohio this week for SmackDown. They want to see your gimmick." So I had started doing the announcing thing.
The announcing thing.
And they're gonna. And so I went to Columbus thinking I'm just gonna do a dark match, or I'm just gonna be an extra. I'll get squashed or whatever, and then back to OVW. And that day, I cut a really good promo in front of Brooklyn Brawler. Brawler told me, he said, "I'm gonna go tell Vince," and he did. And then I actually was supposed to work Funaki, and it was just supposed to be a non-televised match, dark match. Funaki was going to beat me with a super kick, and that was going to be it. And but they still wanted me to do my intro at the beginning. And right before I'm standing in gorilla position, doing push-ups, squats, getting ready, stretching out, going over everything in my head. And first Vince walked up to go sit in gorilla position, and then Dave Lagana, who was the head writer of SmackDown, walked up, and he was like, "Hey, there's been a change." And I immediately, in my head thought, "I cut my match. I got cut. That's okay. I've been there before. That's happened." Try not to get too excited about things, because that happens on a regular basis in the wrestling business. So I was just like, okay. And then he goes, "Actually, this is going to be a televised match. It's going to be on Velocity now. We need to come up with a finish for you, finisher, because you're going to go over. You're going to beat Funaki, and welcome aboard." and just stuck out his hand, and I was like, oh, well, here we go.
Wow.
You know, it was crazy how it just, and then it was like I jumped on the merry-go-round for the next 5 years, and my life was a blur.
I heard, and I'm not sure for who told me, but they changed your last name possibly because of Ole and Arn Anderson. Is that why they changed your name?
That was the reasoning that Vince gave me. He just said, look, I don't want people to think that nepotism is the reason why you are employed or that you are related to them. And plus, in reality, like but he didn't know how I was going to pan out. So I would have been the shitty Anderson, you know, like,
yeah, that's true.
You know, and to be fair, some people might think that anyways, but
yeah, no, I mean, I loved your gimmick. It was the best. You did a great job. Vince McMahon, he has the documentary that came out. Obviously, you almost had the storyline where you were going to be his son.
Yeah.
How was he, Vince, with you? Was he always professional?
Yeah, I always had an interesting relationship with him. He was very friendly and open at the beginning. It got frustrating for me because, you know, at some point it was like everything I did was wrong. Okay. But in the end, it was Jericho that talked me off the ledge one time because I was so mad because I used to come back through the curtain and I would, you know, immediately look at Vince and he would be like, that was fucking terrible. What? I'd go over and he would like, you did this, you did this, you did this. And it was just so frustrating. I was constantly looking for that, like just a pat on the back. Because that's what used to happen when I first started. I would come through the curtain, he'd be like, yeah, you know, and that's all I needed. And and I was complaining to Jericho about it, and he goes, hey, if he didn't care, he wouldn't say anything at all. So take that as a sign of, and then it kind of like, okay, that made me feel a little better. And in hindsight, I couldn't wrap my head around it at the time, but I get it now. I get what he was trying to tell me.
Wow. The Undertaker, you wrestled him. There's an iconic thing. There's a pile driver move that he told you to do. Now, did Vince McMahon told you not to do the pile driver? Is that correct?
Well, Taker just, you know, the thing about working with Undertaker was there wasn't a whole lot of talking in the back. Okay. We didn't plan everything out. There'd be certain things that needed to occur. But other than that, it was just kind of like we just go out and listen to the people. And he was just really good at listening and knowing what to give them and when to take it away and when to tease them with something. So we're in the middle of this match. It's the first time we're wrestling on a pay-per-view. And he goes, pile drive me. Give me a pile driver. And I was like, oh, well, he must mean, you know, he's going to backdrop me out of it or something. So I like pulled him in and I'm waiting for him to backdrop me. And he was like, give it to me. And okay. And I, you know, he's 290 pounds. He's the golden goose. I got to make sure I take care of him. So I pinched his head so hard and I held so tightly and made sure that I took care of him, that he didn't spike his head, you know. And I gave it to him. And then I came back through the curtain and Vince just gave me one of these. And I went over to him and he goes, don't ever do that again. He goes, I'm not mad at you. I know that he told you to do that. He's trying to help you out. And sometimes he takes things a little too far with helping. He really, really wants to help you get over. Don't ever do that again. There's two people that I allow to do a pile driver, and you're not one of them. It was, you know, Kane and Undertaker were the only two people that were.
Correct. So, did you enjoy being a heel or a baby face?
You know, being a heel is fun. But the challenging part of like getting people to genuinely react to you and respond to you, that's an entirely different ballgame.
Mhm.
So I like both,
Mm.
but I
Okay.
do enjoy still to this day whenever a promoter asks me to be a heel, I'm all about it.
Okay. That's
Um,
good. You know, heel is the
it,
way you go.
yeah, I
um.
like them both,
Okay.
honestly.
Okay. I want to touch base. Randy Orton.
Mhm.
Obviously, that match I've watched it a million times, and there was nothing wrong with that bump. To be
No,
honest with you,
yeah,
nothing.
no,
And
there wasn't.
actually, and I've seen it with other wrestlers. I know a lot of the boys. We talk about it. There was nothing wrong with that bump. What
Yeah,
happened, Ken? What happened?
nothing. Like that was I don't know. I can only speculate as to what was going on behind the scenes there.
Hmm.
But for whatever reason, him and Randy, it was Randy and John, Randy and
Hmm.
John
Yep.
that went to the boss, and I feel like that was set up, that he
Hmm.
intentionally took that bump that looked.
Hmm.
It's yeah,
Wow.
just the way he like turned in midair, and
Yeah.
then like playing back the entire day and how everything played out, the conversations that we had leading up to it, the way that you can even like if you watch the match, you can see John and Randy like looking at each other
Hmm.
and sort of communicating to each other, like, we
Hmm.
good?
Hmm.
Um, but it is what it is. And I would say we're different people. Like, I
Hmm.
know Randy Orton is a different person today than he was back then. I am. Um, and I was doing things, I wasn't doing things the way that I should have, or I would have never been put in a situation like that
Hmm.
where they could have had such an impact on my career, right? Like, had I been doing all the things correctly behind the scenes, in the gym, in the ring, I think I was doing everything in the ring that I could possibly do, but like, um, it was just behind the scenes stuff. I really wasn't putting forth a whole lot of effort.
Hmm. Wow.
And had I been doing that, if sorry,
Okay.
if if that same scenario would have, I feel like Vince would have just said, like, quit your bitching, like, stop,
Hmm.
fuck off,
Um.
and it wouldn't have played out the way that it did. But it was like the straw that broke the camel's back. It was like, I'm tired of hearing his name in a negative light, and I'm tired. Like, it's got to go.
You wrestled John Cena, Shawn Michaels, Ric Flair. Is there any wrestler you wish you could have wrestled that you never got to?
Steve Austin,
Hmm.
like, when I was there was pretty much, it was understood that there was no chance that was ever going to happen again.
Hmm.
Uh, Everybody thought he was done.
Hmm.
I would say, Rock too.
Yeah. The
Like,
Rock too.
those guys were my biggest influences for sure.
Hmm. Um, Eddie Guerrero, you wrestled him in his last match.
Hmm.
When you wrestled him, did you see anything? Was he breathing heavy? Anything wrong, or was he just no, nothing? He
No,
seemed fine.
no,
He seemed perfectly
no.
fine.
The thing about Eddie, though, that I noticed right when I first met him was he was tired all the time. Like, he was beaten down. Like, he put his body through a lot,
Hmm.
in different ways, obviously, like
Yeah.
both in the ring and recreationally. And but it was this interesting thing. You'd watch him backstage, and he would just kind of like, you know,
Really.
look sore, beat up,
Mm,
and then that music would hit. And he would go through the curtain and he
mm,
would just completely turn into a different person.
hmm.
He'd become the
Wow.
Eddie Guerrero that everybody knows, and then like come back through the curtain and
Wow.
back.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Um, Umanga, you are actually, we know Zilla Fatu. You
Uh,
wrestled him and his father. You wrestled his father. Do you see any similarities between the two when you wrestled both of them?
oh yeah, definitely.
Really?
Yeah. The thing about Umaga was when I was doing dark matches and stuff, right? I was doing extra work for WWE. Umaga and Rosie and Jamal were doing the 3-minute warning thing. And they had like a really bad rap on the indie. I remember reading all the dirt sheets every week. It would be like 3-minute warning, hurt another indie guy, like, blew out his shoulder or something. And when I got there, I remember Tony Gurria walking around. No, it was Sergeant Slaughter had the sheet. It would be like Scotty Tuhati versus blank, Funaki versus blank, 3-minute warning versus blank. And I remember he had the sheet and it looked like that, and there were all these blanks. And he said, "Can you tell me who I should put here?" And he pointed at the 3-minute warning one, and I was like, "Yeah, you can put me there." He was like, and like I said, at the time, they're known for hurting guys. And he said, "All right, pick an opponent or pick a partner, and I'll put him in." And what it turned out to be was like, I think the people that got hurt were disrespectful, didn't understand the way that, my job there is not to get myself over. It's to get them over. It's to make them look as good as I possibly can. And if you do that, everything's good. And if you sell big and you listen, and I never got hurt. In fact, my point in all this was like, he was extremely light. His work was so crisp, and it looked like he was murdering you, but it was all just art.
Wow.
He was so good. Even like the first time he ever chopped me was in that match, and I barely felt it. Some guys, you feel it.
Oh yeah.
And with him, it was a work. But if he gave me one of those big ones and I didn't sell it, I could see him going, "All right, well, now I got to really hit you."
Wow.
And I think that's what ended up happening with those guys. But I loved him, and I loved working with Zilla, and I think he's got a great attitude. And it meant a lot to me. He reached out to me via social media. Like he hit me up on Instagram like 2 years ago. At this point, he was just breaking in the business. He was like, "Hey man, I'd really love to have a match with you." So we made that happen. I reached out to a promoter in Wisconsin, and so it was a little. I want to do it again. Actually, I just ran into Zilla. I'm sure you saw him this last weekend when we were in.
Yep. In New York. Yeah.
So,
He's a good kid. Good kid. He's a really good kid.
So. I think so.
I want to be respectful of your time, but I wanted to ask you, how did you get picked in the movie Behind Enemy Lines for WWE? How'd that happen?
So there was I remember they had auditions for that.
Oh, really? Okay.
So yeah, I remember Mark Carano called me and said, "Hey, we're doing a new movie, Behind Enemy Lines Part 3. I didn't even know there was a 2. So he just said "Hey, we're going to send you a script, and on this date, you're going to go to a hotel, and they're going to have auditions." And so literally I went in, and there was probably 20 other guys too. I remember Batista, and I remember Paul London and Spanky, and there was a bunch of other people. I think Miz did it. And I just, they called me about 3 weeks later and said, we decided to pick you.
Wow.
And yeah.
Wow.
So it was actually a little bit of a process.
Okay. That's not bad. Any good road stories? Who'd you travel with on the road?
I traveled with different people throughout the years. I first started traveling with Matt Hardy and Shane Helms. And then, actually, the first couple of weeks, I was on the road with some of the OVW guys that I knew. And I remember Batista pulled me aside and he was like, "Hey, nothing against those guys, but you need to get in the car with a vet. You need to get in the car with, a Chris Benoit and an Eddie Guerrero." And I was like, "You're right." And I went over and "Hey, Chris, would you mind if I rode with you and Eddie?" And he goes, I'll get back to you. And he came, found me like an hour later, and he said, that's fine. He goes, you're going to do all the driving now.
Okay.
Yeah, of course I am. Of course I'm going to do all the driving. And then, so I just started the next couple of weeks. I rode with Eddie and Chris, which was, I learned a ton. It was also like really stressful because I was doing all the driving. So I was tired. There would be like 3.5, 4 hour drives some nights. I was staying in hotels that I couldn't afford because up until that point, I was, we'd heal a room. Like there'd be 2 or 3 of us that would get a Red Roof Inn for $80 a night, and we'd split it. And then now I'm riding with these guys who didn't share rooms, who would like to stay at Hamptons and stuff like that. So that was kind of stressful, trying to figure out like, all right, how am I gonna afford this? Because I wasn't making road money quite yet. It takes a while after you get on the road to start getting some royalty checks and pay-per-view checks and stuff like that. So, that was interesting. And then I rode for years with Randy Orton and Bob Holly and Cody Rhodes, Santino Marella too. Like that, those 4 guys, we rode together for a couple of years. When I was at TNA, it was I was in a big group. We'd get a van, and it would be me, Christopher Daniels, Frankie Kazarian, AJ Styles, and Gunner.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so we had a ton of fun. Traveled all over the world, really. So I do have, nothing that I can think of off the top of my head that's too crazy, but
that's cool. That's really cool. Would you do a WWE Royal Rumble return if they asked?
Yeah,
you would.
Yeah, I would.
Surprise entrance, you would. That's cool.
Yeah. It's something that Royal Rumble is still my favorite pay-per-view of the year.
Oh yeah.
There's just, even when I was working for the company too, I always I never wanted to know who was going to go. I never wanted to know anything about it, so I would stay away from it. The one Royal Rumble that I was involved with was the one where Cena made a surprise return.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about that was, they had 29 of us in a room, and they would go through the first 10 eliminations or first 5 eliminations, and then, all right, everybody, you guys can leave, and they would kick those guys out of the room. They would go another 5, kick those guys out of the room, and another 5, and finally, John. I think when John came back, there was only 7 or 8 people left in the ring. Right, because he was number 30 that year.
He was. He was the last one. So they keep it a surprise.
So they kept it a surprise from everybody. And the thing is you never know. Obviously, you read dirt sheets and stuff. You hear stuff that happens in the back, and you wonder who's the guy that's spilling this stuff. So they can't really trust anybody. So they don't trust anybody.
Yeah. Wow, that's pretty cool. So, well, Ken, I want to thank you for your time. It was a really great interview. I hope we could do it again. When you come up to Jersey, I hope you visit again, and big New York. Where can people find you with the Academy? Where's the address? Where can they look you up?
So we've got, you can come to our website. It's the Academy, SOPW.com. You can follow me on Instagram, Mr. Ken Anderson. You can follow me on, I don't really use Twitter, but Instagram and Facebook. And you can just text me directly if anybody wants to get a hold of me. I'm at 507-722-2776. That number is all over my social media. Usually if I make a post about the Academy, I put the number there. That comes right to my phone. It comes to my wife's phone as well. So between the 2 of us, we can, help you. If you're interested in getting into the business, we'd like to help you do that. We're located in Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Okay.
So Twin Cities.
All right, cool, man. I'm going to be putting that all in the link in the description below so everyone can see that, all of Ken's information. He's got a great wrestling school, so everyone check it out, and his Instagram. Ken, it was been an honor. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon, brother.
Same here. Thanks, Joe.
You got it, brother.
Thanks for watching the Zapata Brand Podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast and listen where all podcasts are available.